I'm Sarah Brumfield. This has Ben Brumfield, and together we're From the Page. We're here to talk about new features in From the Page, which is kind of a departure from our usual webinars where we're talking about kind of the soft skills with crowdsourcing or how we think AI is going to be applied to archives and special collections. This is kind of a deep dive into things that we've built in From the Page in the last year or so. So we're really glad you joined us because it's a little bit more blatant promotion than we usually do. But let's go to the next slide. So we have a couple other webinars that are coming up. One is Your First Crowdsourcing Project, which we do about every quarter. But if you're new to crowdsourcing, it's a great one to attend to kind of learn more about, how do you find volunteers and how do you keep them engaged and all of those types of soft skills that come with crowdsourcing. And then on June 27th, we actually have a guest speaker. Desiree Stukes of the University of North Carolina Libraries is joining us to talk about one of the features we're going to talk about today, which is alt text creation and From the Page, but from a lens of the conscious editing guidelines that they use around metadata. So I think it's going to be interesting because it's a kind of a combination of technical and thoughtful. So I don't know.
It's not just the tech side of things. Yes. You'll see that today, and that will take maybe 2 minutes. But what do you actually do with alt text, and how do you actually really make things accessible is more complicated than
just having a tool that helps you do it, right? Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone, and then unmute ourselves. All right.
One more person in the waiting room.
Okay. I think I might have spoken too soon, but all right.
Okay, well, let's get started. So here's what we're going to talk about today. These are kind of all the new features. Finding a project by subject, or what we've been calling subject tagging, in more intuitive collection settings, transcriber self-serve service hour letters, transcriber forums, collaborative alt text creation, which I just alluded to, reviewer spreadsheet exports, and AI assist for transcribers.
All right, let's get started. And we're going to do this as a live demo. So I'm going to pull out a full screen and we will see about sharing tabs. So you should all be able to see my browser right now, all of my glorious tabs. So let's get started. So the background on this feature, in late 2021, we started getting complaints from volunteers saying that they had finished transcribing the material that they were interested in for the university archives, special collections, the institution that they were working with, and they were looking for more similar material, but there wasn't any at their institution. And we realized that we needed a way to let people find projects by type as opposed to by who was hosting this.
Right. So what we did is we worked with an archivist who created a controlled vocabulary of tags that applied to let's just call it a reasonable number of collections on From the Page. And she manually tagged a whole bunch of things we had. And then we unfortunately sat on it for too long. And then we had a whole bunch of new projects. So we actually did some work with ChatGPT trying to get it to tag things the same way that the archivist did, which had mixed success. And then we went through and did a big human review of all of those ChatGPT tags. And we're at the point where this will probably go out. This is live on the server now with real data and real projects. It's just at a URL that is not public. Yeah. So we'll swap that out today or tomorrow because it's ready to go. But if you look here, what you see is tags where From the Page has at least one and ideally 3 or more projects. And volunteers will see this when they click on the Find a Project tag, find a project link at the top of the page, and then they can click through and see what there is to see. One of the things that, so here's an example, collections tagged Australia. So we have a lot of projects in Australia, and these all have something to do with either institutions or material that talk about Australia.
Yeah, and one of the things that we maybe a little controversial is that we actually don't display what institution hosts these particular projects. We want people to be able to see what's going on from a kind of collection by collection or project by project basis, as opposed to having to know where to go. All of the existing institutional homepages still all exist, so somebody can still go to University of North Carolina's projects and see all of them listed. So that's all still there. That just provides an alternative way for people to find things to work on.
And when you click into one of these, of course, you see which institution it's coming from.
Yeah.
So
how do you define what those tags ought to be?
So that's actually that kind of leads us to our next new feature, which is our collection settings. So if you look here in the collection settings for the East Civil War letters, about the 5th thing down is subject tags. And you can see this is where those tags show up. When you create a new collection in FromThePage, we're going to strongly recommend that you tag your project, because that is part of what makes it show up in that new Find a Project page kind of by category. It's a controlled vocabulary of tags, and we're kind of being benevolent dictators on what those are, because we need them broad enough and general interest enough and bigger enough buckets that you actually have more than one collection when you click through into it.
Right. It might not make sense for the State Library of California to tag all of their projects California in a normal kind of collection world, but in this case, it actually does make sense to have everything tagged California so that people can find these. So you can edit them yourselves, or delete things, add things as you go.
Right. This is part of our new collection settings, which if you've worked creating a collection or updating a collection in the last month or two, you have probably seen. But we used to have all of our collection settings on one page, and it was very difficult to find the thing you were looking for. So what we've done is we have broken those up into kind of the tasks on the side. So general information about the project, task configuration, look and feel, privacy and access, your help text and your transcription conventions, quality control, and then if you are the owner of the project, then you get this danger zone section as well, where you could actually delete the project or blank it out. If you're just staff on it, then you don't see that last category. You can kind of see, as Ben's walking through this, some of the different types of things that you can do in this. It's all the same stuff that we've had before. We've added a little bit of help text. You don't have to hit save at the bottom of the page like you did previously, so that's a big improvement. Hopefully it's a lot more intuitive, a lot more attractive. So something to make your life easier and better as you work with these projects.
Okay, so we end on the danger zone, and then we'll move on to something a little bit less terrifying. So the next feature we wanted to talk about was volunteer hour tracking and better ways of kind of letting the volunteers that are working on FromThePage projects for either court-appointed volunteer hours or school volunteer hours or other kinds of things that they want credit for, to better able to access that themselves.
This is interesting because this is something that we're hearing from our fellow crowdsourcers, people who run crowdsourcing platforms for the Smithsonian or the Library of Congress. Also are getting a lot of requests for this type of data. When COVID happened, a lot of people started looking for and finding online volunteer opportunities. So it sort of changes a little bit of the motivation and a little bit of what people are looking for in a crowdsourcing platform. So that's kind of why we're approaching it this way. What we've done is at the very bottom of your activity, we've put a your hours, and we will probably put this someplace else. That was feedback.
It might go much higher on the screen for the Collaborator Dashboard.
Right. And you click that, and you, as a collaborator, you go to a page like this, which by default gives you your information for the last week. So this is Ben's for the last week. Oh, go back for a minute. And it shows which collections he worked on for which institutions and how many pages. And if you look kind of above, there's a summary of how many hours he's put in. We click download a letter, it'll pull down a PDF. Now you can go to that next tab. And that PDF does not make any claim for your institution. We feel like we can only represent what FromThePage knows about and is willing to certify, so that doesn't always line up with things like what a court needs, but sometimes it does. So it looks like this. It shows how much time you put in overall. And then it also shows which institutions you did work for, which collection, and how many pages you worked on.
So let's talk a little bit about how this is calculated. There's a lot going on behind the scenes to try to make this as accurate as possible. One of the things that we've done is that we've added a way for us to be able to track when a volunteer is actually editing a document, because we were losing volunteer hours when people would open up a new tab for, say, a great big tax roll that they wanted to work on, and then go to lunch, or more often, their lunch break was over, they'd open up the tab for what they wanted to work on tomorrow, and then tomorrow at the beginning of their lunch break, they would start typing, and then at the very end, they would hit the save button, and that would be the first time that our servers would see their interaction. So even though they'd worked all the way through their lunch break, we would only see, them hitting the save button, and would say, okay, well, you've volunteered for about 30 seconds. That's great. Even though there was actually a whole hour worth of work going on. So
we actually also saw things kind of to the opposite, where people would open up transcription tabs and hit save without actually making any changes, which wasn't good either, right? That's not what we want to give credit for real work.
Yeah, so while we can't fix absolutely everything, what we have started doing is tracking when people are actually editing works in a collection, knowing that they may be going between those works and other pages to do research or things like that. There's a lot of kind of grace period involved in there. I think, somebody can wander away for 10 minutes before we kind of stop counting. But we're trying to make this as accurate as possible, with the proviso that we may err a little bit, but we're trying to err a little bit in the volunteers' favor. One of the things that we will not be counting is if someone just goes to their own homepage and hits reload a bunch of times.
Well,
you have to work on an actual project.
Yeah, one of the things we were seeing is they were going to their transcriber dashboard and clicking on that hours link to check how many hours they had put in. But like for an hour a day or something, like they just keep going back and checking if I hit my number yet, if I hit my number yet. But again, we want, again, for this to capture real transcriber time on a collection.
Right. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is discussion forums. So this is a feature that was funded by the State Library of New South Wales that allows general discussions to take place. We wanted to connect this as much as possible to page notes, so you have a link to get there. But really, this is a little bit different from the page notes experience, because notes are about trying to figure out what's going on with a particular page, right? I can't read this word, or I saw something interesting. These are more for general themes. So, what do I do in general about horses? Or, I spotted something really interesting here. Has anybody else seen that? So this is a way to communicate with volunteers. It is off by default. You turn it on in those setting screens, but it is something that does exist. So we can dive in here and we can see that there's, been discussion. It's just Sarah saying, welcome to the project, right? But we can go back and forth and, comment on that. So it's just typical message forums.
So if you use this, let us know how it works, because this is, it works technically, but is it another layer that you want to add to your projects? Are your transcribers engaging on it? We're seeing engagement from, I think the UK National Archives has some volunteers who use theirs pretty actively.
So it would be great to get more data for best practices and kind of guidance on how to make this helpful, not a burden.
So one of the other features we built, so you're hopefully familiar with what we call our metadata description, which gives you the ability to build a form and ask questions about a document, a letter, a diary, a photo.
Or our field-based transcription, which is connected to a particular image where you have fields that are defined a particular page.
Yeah. So University of North Carolina actually asked us if we could build field-based information or a field-based entry that kind of was optimized for creating web-based alt text. So if you put images on the web, you need alt text to make them more accessible. And so all this is a text field, but it does something really interesting. If you notice on the bottom left, there's a count of how many characters you put in. Alt text has limits to how much you can. It has kind of recommended lengths and max lengths and stuff. So what we do is we show you the count. And once you start hitting, I think when you hit 130, we're like, okay, you're getting pretty close. You might want to stop here pretty soon. When you hit 160, it actually turns kind of a light red, and dark red when you hit 190. And at this point, you're kind of over. And I think we stop. I think we limit you when you hit something. 250.
Yes, right.
255.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is. So that's the actual maximum you can do for alt text. The recommendation is a lot smaller. So we kind of have those color coding things that start giving you some input into how long what you're writing is. And then those can come out as spreadsheets that are associated with the identifier, either the uploaded file name or the identifier that came in or the metadata that came in with that document.
There'll be one for each image that comes out. Do you want to talk about how to set these up?
Yeah, so you just set this up like a field-based project, and there's something called a alt text input type. So you can see that right here. And that's what turns it on. You can give it a label. You can put some instructions before it. Yeah.
And next month, we'll be hearing from experts on how to actually use this.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people using this yet. So I really would love for more institutions to try it and to see if it helps, do collaborative work.
So we've also added a new export format. There was a request that people be able to export the comments from their projects because there's a lot of interesting intellectual work that goes on in comments and the notes on each page. So if you go into a project, your export tab, and click export all works, you scroll down, there will be a brand new notes CSV file. So that is an export format that gives you a spreadsheet with every note that's been left by volunteers in the collection. So what that spreadsheet looks like is, as usual, we kind of add the title and identifier of what document it came from, what work, as well as the pages, then a URL to take you back to those pages. Then more interesting, we say, here's who worked on these particular pages. What's the status of the page? Because this is something that may be useful in reviewing work. And then what the actual notes are that have been left. So you can see people asking questions, I'm not sure who Mary is, things like that. And then who actually left the note. So this is different from the contributor. So here's contributors as everyone who worked on a page. So here's an example of two different people who worked on this page, and a single note left by one person, me in this case.
So this is in addition to kind of all of the other review tools we have, the reviewer dashboard and the quality sampling. We just know that notes kind of help you pinpoint where you might need to look closer. So everything, we're trying to do everything we can to make the review process faster and more efficient. And if you have ideas for that, we are happy to hear them. This was an idea from, I don't remember who, maybe Clayton. Okay. Yeah, well, actually that was Library of Virginia. So either USDA National Agricultural Library or Library of Virginia suggested this.
And one of the other good things about this is that, as you're exporting projects, as they wind down and you're archiving them, hopefully this gives you a way to archive not just transcriptions, but also the discussion about them.
Right, because sometimes it's not about, I can't read this word, it's something interesting and rich about what's on the page, and figuring out where to put that, I think, is kind of a challenge, but now you have a spreadsheet at least to start with.
So the last feature that we wanted to talk about is still in beta?
Yeah, we're not using the word beta, we're using development partner testing, but yes, it's beta. We've got about 11 institutions that are working with us to test this.
Right. So this is one of the ways that we're integrating artificial intelligence into FromThePage. And we did an entire webinar on this in February. So there's about a 20-minute long deep dive into kind of how this works and what's going on under the hoods and how to use it. But what we want to do is make sure that humans are still in the middle of the process and have control over it. So we wanted to be able to add AI as an assistant, as a way of helping resolve words, but not as a way of replacing people. So this is an example in which we have taken this document and sent it over to our friends at Transcribers to do handwritten text recognition on it. And if I zoom in, I can click the AI Assist button and see the text that it came up with. You know, Itingo, Como Yo, and you know that may help me read a word that I can't otherwise read. And I can always, if I need to, turn that off, right? And we actually have observed people going back and forth, turning these on and off again as they want to look at the original, then they want to look at the AI examples. The other piece of that is that you can use the AI generated text as a rough draft that will kind of pre-populate the edit form field, the transcription field, with this AI generated text. And this example is from the 20th century. It's pretty good. It's not perfect. It still needs to be revised. But as Sarah mentioned, we are working with 11 institutions to try to test this out right
On
now.
lot of a big diversity of different types of material is kind of the goal there.
So that is everything that we have. Do we have something to wrap up with before Q&A?
Yeah, there's our standard call to action. If you would like to run a project on FromThePage, we have a 200-page kind of free account that lets you do a quick start, and we'll do a call with you and help you get it uploaded and configured, and we'll promote it to transcribers both through that tag based interface, but also the emails that we send out monthly. So if you're interested in trying this out, we really would encourage you to. There's no strings. We want this to be something that works for you. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, then go find something else. Do something else. So we're gonna open.
We're open up for questions, and I'll stop sharing. I'll also paste in the link to those webinars and this to the end of the chat as well.
So yeah, we showed you a whole bunch of stuff today. Do you have any questions or comments or anything? We can talk about the stuff that's not new. If you're new to FromThePage, you may not know about everything that we do. This is not as discussion worthy as some of our
Yes.
some of our presentations.
I'm presenting on a lot of stuff.
Sarah and Ben, you do have a question in your chat.
Oh,
we do.
Great.
Oh, does AI text work for tables as well? So the Carnegie Hall Archives is testing that right now with their booking ledgers, which is a fascinating source. On every performance at Carnegie Hall for decades are in these. What we're finding so far is that the AI assist, right, the text overlay in the image viewer is working great. But we don't have any way to convert the plain text into kind of a first draft, because you need to know which cell in a table to stick each element into. And that's not information that we can get easily from the HTR files. So halfway is the example.
The AI assist part does, the draft piece doesn't. And it's, that's going to be interesting. Part of it is we've spent a lot of, like that particular project, we spent a lot of time with the archivist setting up that project, kind of talking through what the data entry needs to look like and how much do you ask your transcribers to interpret versus trying to match the page exactly, because it doesn't always, if you want a spreadsheet out the other end, it doesn't always match kind of how humans wrote, 50 years ago. So yeah, it's that one may work eventually for some projects, but maybe not for all, so.
Teresa says she thinks that the search by type for records that are available is a tool to find projects of interest. We hope so. We were a little bit reluctant to do this because, you know, we don't want to, you know, encourage a volunteer to leave the work that they're doing with the institution that has brought them to this project. And so, you know, this isn't going to be shoved in front of anybody's face, but you know, when you have volunteers complaining that they're looking for things to transcribe and they can't find them, there's a responsibility for them as well.
And it keeps them on the platform and around and engaged so that when you run your next project, they're still there.
Yeah.
And it's still part of what we find is people make this part of their day and their week. It's their hobby. And if there's nothing left, then they go find a new hobby.
Yes.
And we wouldn't want that, would we?
Can you request new subject tags?
I thought there was African American history. Do we not have enough things tagged that way? We will look into that and check and make sure.
You can absolutely request new
Yes.
tags. Yes, absolutely is the right answer. Just send us email, support@fromthepage.com, and we'll look into it.
Yeah, and we'll check that one because I know it was part of the original tag set and it may have fallen out, but I wouldn't think
I
so.
can't, yeah,
I can't
there's
imagine.
so many collections that ought to be tagged that I
Yeah.
have trouble.
Yeah.
So that could be a glitch. We can look for it. Other questions or comments? Okay.
Oh, thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, well, if there aren't any other comments, thank you all for attending. This is
Short
quite a
and sweet.
turnout. Yes.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate it, and we hope to see you soon.